Welcome into another edition of the Cubs REKAP Podcast, a presentation of our REKAP YouTube channel and available audio only everywhere you get your favorite podcast with my partner, my friend, Gordon Wittenmeyer. I'm David Kaplan. It's Cubs and Reds game 2 of their 3-game series. Gordon is at the ball game. I am watching the train wreck that is known as the Chicago Cubs, dead last in the NL Central. But Gordon, the deadline a little bit ago has
Emphasis
come.
on dead. Emphasis on dead.
Yes. Deadline has come.
12-1 they've been outscored since I got here.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Back to you.
Cubs and Reds are playing, but the deadline has come and gone a little bit ago. The Cubs made a big, bold move getting Paredes, and then they traded Leiter Jr. for a couple of prospects to the Yankees, but that was pretty much all that they did. I know Frankie Montas is no longer a member of the Reds. Are you surprised the Cubs didn't do more?
Yeah, only in the sense of if you're going to get rid of Leiter, I would have thought that you would have traded some other pieces too. What it tells me is, and we saw a ton of activity these last 24 hours and a lot in the reliever market, it tells me that their relievers just didn't have the same value as some of the others on the market. And that, the Reds experienced the same thing to some degree. They weren't getting the return they wanted. So, why move a guy for what you think is nothing? You're
telling me Leiter isn't worth more than 2 middling prospects?
Yeah, I thought one of those guys, I saw one of the analysis said one of those guys is pretty good. But if you're going to trade with the Yankees these days, it's not like they got a ton of highly, you're not going to get top 100 guys from them at this point. They depleted their farm system. They made a trade. What was the trade they made over the weekend? I'm blanking. But they used up a couple of their best prospects on that trade. So, if you're going to trade with and again, that goes back to my point. That was, I give Jed and the front office credit that they felt that was the best deal they could get for him. And if that's the case, there's your market.
And by the way, just a little bit ago, Christopher Morel goes deep for the Tampa Bay Rays.
Of course he does. He's going to be a 3-time All-Star for the Rays.
And he's starting at second base, which I was at the game last year when he said to me and my buddy Billy Alvarez, yeah, I'm more of a natural second baseman / shortstop. Third base is not my position.
Well, that it makes it a good trade for both sides then, because Paredes is a fit to return to the Cubs organization at this point in his career. And Morel, we saw for this year and last year, the fit just isn't there. When you got Swanson and Horner in the middle and neither one of those guys are going anywhere, it was good. It was good for all parties concerned, including Morel. In that case.
So when you look at the trade for Paredes, you give up Morel, you give up Hunter Biggie and Ty Johnson, a lower level pitching prospect who they liked. Do you think the Cubs overpaid, underpaid? Do you like Paredes?
I do like Paredes. Now, that said, he's not the same hitter that he had been, but he's young enough that you would think that he hasn't forgotten how to hit, and maybe a change of scenery helps. There are people still in the organization that are familiar to him, so maybe that helps. I don't think – could that come bite you in the ass? Sure. They could bite both teams in the ass. Although the Rays have made a pretty good science of these types of moves. The way it bites you in the ass is if Morel goes off. If Morel just becomes a star and they find a place for him and he thrives for the next 2, 3, 4 years, that would be where you say you lost the trade. Short of that, if he does well and Paredes does well, both teams get what they figured they were going to get out of that deal. If Morel goes and he does the same thing he's done with the Cubs, nobody lost that deal.
Okay, in terms of where the Cubs are now, look, they've obviously said we're not going to contend the rest of the way in the wild card chase. They're down 5-0 to the Reds tonight. They were 7-1 losers on Monday night And on top of it all, your best reliever is now pitching for the New York Yankees. It's obvious Jed has pulled the plug on this team, right?
No question. I mean, the fact that you subtracted from a bullpen that desperately needed additions just to tread water is pulling the plug. You don't necessarily say that about any other team, but with this team, that's that clear area. That area was already costing you games. I don't expect them to finish strong at this point, if that's what you're asking me.
Yeah, as I look with them in last place, so people have been texting me and tweeting at me. When you and Gordon tape, what do you think of where the team is now? What do I think the future is of Jed Hoyer? After doing a lot of research and making calls, Jed's going nowhere, but I do not believe. In fact, I'm pretty confident he's not going to get an extension. So he's going to enter next season as a lame duck team president, that if they don't play well and show significant improvement, he will be gone. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me at all. We've talked about this before. That, to me, that sort of passive-aggressive approach to him where he is on his contract and what his performance has been is as close as you get to the Ricketts holding their executives accountable historically since they've been with this organization. So that's exactly what I would have figured. If that, to me, is holding him accountable, not giving him an extension, that to me is an indictment of ownership, of saying, we're not happy with the job you've done. So, that's reading their behavior based on their track record, but that's probably exactly what you and I both would have predicted.
I keep hearing there's a chance that they're at $230 million in payroll this year, approximately. They have about $80 million coming off the books. I do not believe they enter next year at $230 million. I think they're below that. Still gives you plenty of room to be able to make moves, but I'll be very, very, very surprised if they spend $80 million in the offseason.
Well, you better spend every dime you have on a bullpen then, and you better get those calls right when you sign those guys, because that was the Achilles heel and the death of this season for that team. And we saw 2 years ago, this is a second or third year of it. What is this, 2022? We saw his first 2 years, he had pretty good bullpen pieces and did a good job of bringing guys in. Not since then. He's got to get it right again. If he does that, they can be competitive. But here's the other thing that happened, Cap. This is one of the reasons why the Reds are where they are. Last year, the Reds had a winning record, barely missed the playoffs. They're better on paper this year. Their pitching staff is much stronger this year. But teams around the league and around baseball have gotten better. Everybody saw what happened in the postseason last year with the 2 wild cards running the table. Everybody sees how Jim Bowden was on the podcast last week and told us the new formula in baseball that everybody sees and is buying into. That's why the Kansas City Royals ramped up as hard as they did this year. You saw Cleveland buy not Cleveland should, but we didn't see Cleveland buy in the past, and we didn't see Cleveland buy in the offseason because of financial constraints. But everybody sees that if I got a chance to get in, I got a chance, if I got any pitching at all, to win the short series and maybe set up for the next, not quite as short series, and maybe make a deep run. So you can't run the same damn team back out there and expect the same results. The Reds actually improved, and they're worse off than last year. Pirates are better. The Brewers, they're not as good as they were last year, but they added at the deadline too. They're going to be there. So the Cubs are going to be right back where they were last year if they don't get really creative and make that roster better.
Yeah, I do not have any problem with the Paredes deal. I don't. I just don't believe, and they have to prove me wrong. I think if Juan Soto picked up the phone and went, hello? Yeah, Jed? Juan Soto. Yeah, I'd like to come to Chicago. How much? $400 million. Whatever the number is, the Cubs would turn it down. I don't believe they would ever play in that deep end of the pool, and that for me is sad.
I agree. That's been my take for years now, because I thought they showed us that fairly early on. Well, certainly by the time they won the World Series and started that decline, we saw that happen once they were up at that luxury tax threshold and not getting as much out of it, and not making some mistakes in free agency. But they just weren't willing to go all in. And with Theo not there to get in Tom's ear, they're not going to have. I mean, he's a powerful personality with the cred to go in and persuade ownership. Hey, we can do this now. Let me have this year and next year's resources, and I'll make it happen right now, like he did, and he made it happen. They don't have that. They don't have that power personality. They don't have the track record guy, and I don't think Jed's the same thinker in that regard. So yeah, no chance. No chance they go into the deep end.
How much do you think the Cubs spend year by year on baseball operations? Because I was doing some math today, and again, I leave the ballpark renovations to the side. Forget what they did at Wrigley, $1 billion. Okay, great. That's your ballpark. You make a ton of money on it. So leave that to the side.
And a lot of that's tax deductible. It's capital expenditures.
If they're 230 in on player payroll, they spent $40 million guaranteed dollars on a manager, so they are at 200. But that's a year, $8 million a year. So we're at 238, and then you've got to add in all the personnel, Jed and Carter, and this. Would it be a stretch for you to say that the Cubs are spending, with the minor league operation and the Dominican and all that, $325 million a year?
Maybe. They can afford it.
No question they can afford it.
They make money to afford all that and stick a bunch in their pocket.
But what is amazing to me then is, Gordon, and I know there are people out there listening going, preach, preach, preach. How in the hell do you spend that much money and get a dead last team in this division? That is a freaking joke.
It is. And you mentioned, all you got to do is look at the payroll, because that's the difference. That's the primary difference team to team. So look at the Reds getting whatever they're getting for $100 million or whatever it is. Look at the Pirates spending way less than that, and ahead of both those teams. Milwaukee, where are they? Just a little north of the Reds, and they're way north of everybody else. So, yeah, it should be embarrassing to them. It really should be, and the accountability should be a lot more than, oh well, I'm not going to extend it. You'll be a lame duck next year, because the job just hasn't gotten done. And if you're going to make decisions at the margins, try to make improvements at the margins, and pin an entire season in one case on the manager, then your decisions better be impeccable. You better be making all the right ones, like, for instance, the Tampa Bay Rays seem to do so often. So, but that's not happening. They're making ordinary decisions, but they're putting themselves in a box where they have to be extraordinary for the team to improve.
Yeah, it's literally pathetic that you could spend this kind of money and not have one guy that your son or daughter would come home and go, can we go see him? Whether you had Chris Bryant or Anthony Rizzo or Sammy Sosa or whoever it was, there is not one compelling guy on that roster where you go, I have to go see that guy play.
Look, when that free agent shortstop market came up a couple of years ago, there were a couple guys, Xander Bogaerts got 280, Trey Turner got 300, Carlos Correa got a couple $300 million offers, and they wound up with less because of the medicals. But you took the number 4 guy in the market. You decided we're gonna get an impact guy, a quote impact guy. We're gonna value the glove, and we're gonna pay a lot, but not as much as that. We're not going to make it a franchise record contract, but we'll make it almost a franchise record contract. Those are the kind of things where if you're going to go that big, go big, get the guy. I said all along that winter that I like Trey Turner. And I think Trey Turner would have been a guy that would have been a difference maker.
Yeah, from what I was told, they tried to get involved, and he said, I'm staying east. It's no chance.
Okay, fair enough. But I don't know how deep they got involved in Correa. I was told that they were talking, but it sounded like they fairly early on focused on Dansby and made him the guy. And the problem with that isn't, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing inherently wrong with him. I just wonder if he's a $177 million player, because that to me suggests a guy you're gonna build a lineup around. And you're not doing that with him. I mean,
how about the Brewers in the same free agent class went, no, we're good. We'll sign Willie Adames. I'd take him over Dansby.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you could have done that. If you're going to say, well, Trey Turner's the guy we want, but he doesn't want to come here, I'm going to go shorter term, smaller for now, and then look at that market later. I see what I develop and look at that market in a year or two, and maybe I'll go make a play for Willie Adames and give him more than the Brewers will give him. And I won't have to commit as much as I did to Dansby for as long.
He signed a 2-year deal.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So you could have easily gone in and won that bidding.
Okay, so before we wrap this up, because they didn't do that much, Leiter Jr.'s gone. Paredes comes in. As you look at this team, the biggest need for me this winter is not only fixing your freaking closer and getting your bullpen right. You got to get a superstar, whether that's Juan Soto, whether that's Anthony Santander, who's a really good player. You got to get some thunder in your lineup.
Okay. You think it's going to happen? Because I don't.
I think, as Jim Bowden said to me, he thinks they're going to try to play checkbook baseball. When I talked to him earlier, he said checkbook baseball. But will they go to the nth degree checkbook baseball? No shot.
No, and you're still going to have to spend some. How much money do you think they'd have to spend on, let's say, 3 quality relievers that you can bank on? Not necessarily long-term deals, but per year value. What do you think they'd have to spend to get that?
$40 million total?
Yeah, average. Well, maybe not even quite that. I'm not talking about 2 closers and a setup guy. I'm talking, a guy that could close, and maybe a couple other guys that can pitch a leverage inning for you here and there. I mean, maybe $25 million for 3 of those guys.
30
for a year. Yeah, I mean, like per year. Yeah, maybe something like that. So 30. Well, that's almost the money you're talking about that there's coming off the books. And if they're not going to go as high as they did this year, then there's no room to add a superstar. But the other thing is, would that one guy make the difference?
If you fixed your bullpen, you have 20 blown saves, and you added, we'll call it Santander, to your lineup, yes, I think you have a much better chance to have a good team.
Yeah, you certainly have a better chance, incrementally. But incrementally is what got them where it got them last year. They improved and fell a game short of even getting into the field.
That's correct.
So this is kind of where you're at. If you're going to do that, then you got to make a bona fide effort to get Juan Soto, because he will transform that lineup. Plus, he gives you another lefty to go with Bellinger. You got 2 guys in there that in a given year have shown themselves to be monster lefties. Now, Bellinger hasn't been that since some stretches last year. But what if he had more help in the lineup? What if he didn't have to be the man?
Look, if he stays in New York, there's not much you can do. But if for some reason he's willing to leave New York, you can't get outbid.
But we know they will. We know
no
they
doubt.
Do not have the desire and will to go that hard, that deep on that.
Completely agree. Gordon, have a great night, man.
You too, man.
Feel a comeback coming for my Cubbies.
Well, it's going to take a while for that to happen. I might have to get out of town first.
Oh, boy. Have a great night.
All right, you too.
All right, that's a wrap for this trade deadline edition of our Cubs Recap Podcast, a presentation of our Recap YouTube channel, available audio only everywhere you get your favorite podcasts. For Gordon, I'm Kap. Rest of the season, we'll see how this thing unfolds. Take that.